At the beginning of the movie, a wounded young woman slowly regains consciousness in what appears to be a completely white room. The moment she opens her eyes, she panics and tries to get up but is unable to. Her legs are injured, wrapped in bandages. As she scans the room, a sinister male voice speaks, telling her she overslept. He introduces himself as Thomas Allcroft, her kidnapper. He explains that he plans to keep her captive until she falls in love with him. He then reveals her name, Ruby Watts, along with personal details about her life, where she's from, where she went to university, her parents' professions, and even her fear of the dark. Ruby has no memory of how she ended up in his custody or anything from her past. Crying, she demands to know what he has done to her, pointing at her wounded legs. Thomas calmly tells her he severed her ligaments and warns her not to move if she ever wants to walk again. He assures her that he didn't touch any of her belongings, which are in a black handbag on a chair near the door. On the floor beside Ruby is a meal and a small cup containing 2 pills. Thomas explains that one is a contraceptive and the other is a painkiller. He then lays out the rules of their life together. She will be given food daily, he will help her wash and use the bathroom, and her schedule will run from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. He makes it clear that escape is impossible since they're miles from the nearest household. When Thomas finishes, Ruby asks if he assaulted her. He firmly denies it and then leaves, locking the door behind him. As the scene ends, Ruby catches a glimpse of her bracelet, engraved with Ruby X. The next day, Ruby is still in the same spot. The empty plate beside her suggests she ate the food but refused to take the pills. Thomas enters and sighs in disappointment when he sees the untouched medicine. He urges her to take them, warning that her pain will only worsen, but Ruby stays silent. As he turns to leave, she asks why he's doing this, but he doesn't answer. Later that night, Thomas returns. The room is now dimly lit with a dark red hue, signaling nighttime. He carefully adjusts Ruby's sleeping body into a fetal position before leaving. The next morning, Thomas brings her breakfast. Still pretending to be asleep, Ruby only stirs when he knocks on the wall. After he leaves, her sleepy, dazed expression shifts to a serious one, revealing she was faking it. She slowly scoots toward her handbag, rummages through it, and pulls out a mirror holding her ID. She stares at it, confused. Noticing a shadow pass by a small window, she quickly stuffs everything back into the bag. However, a small plastic bag escapes and rolls across the floor. She manages to grab and hide it in her pocket just before Thomas re-enters. Thomas sets down a tray of food and inspects her face, noticing she's in pain. He says she should have told him and pulls out a pill bottle from his pocket, offering her a stronger dose. Ruby reluctantly complies, and he hand-feeds her the pills before leaving. That night, Ruby has a disturbing dream of a woman floating in dark water. She wakes up distressed and tries to move but stops when sharp pain shoots through her legs. She suddenly realizes Thomas is already in the room, sitting in a chair nearby. Ruby demands to know who he is and what he has done to her. Thomas calmly repeats exactly what he told her the first time, his name, his plan, and the details he knows about her life. She asks again about her legs. He explains that the procedure was necessary to prevent her from escaping, but assures her they will heal over time. He insists she only needs to stay compliant and take her medication. He also reiterates that the contraceptive pills have no hidden purpose. Once alone, Ruby retrieves and examines her bracelet closely. The next scenes show Ruby's daily life, Thomas performing physical therapy on her, bathing her with washcloths, and Ruby repeatedly throwing a ball at the door in frustration each night. One morning, Ruby discovers a wound on the back of her head. She grabs her mirror from the bag, trying to get a better look, but can't see much. Frustrated, she smashes the mirror into smaller shards and examines her injury more closely. Just as she's about to see something, she notices Thomas watching her from the doorway. Quickly, she hides a glass shard under the bandage on her knee and moves back to her usual spot. Before she can settle, Thomas enters the room and drugs her. That night, Thomas plays an unsettling audio recording designed to discourage her from escaping. He cleans and rearranges the room before dozing off in a chair. His phone alarm eventually wakes him, and he turns off the audio before adjusting Ruby's position and leaving. A montage follows, showing days passing. Thomas brings Ruby food, helps with her hygiene, and Ruby continues playing catch with the ball each night. One morning, Ruby is seen fiddling with the sink's pipes. When Thomas enters with breakfast, he notices the mess, but doesn't react much. Ruby takes the opportunity to ask a question. What happens if she never falls in love with him? Will she be his prisoner forever? She even jokes about what he did to her legs. This surprises Thomas, who asks what he can give her to make her stay more tolerable. Ruby, confused, hesitates before asking for a pillow, a blanket, and a book to pass the time. Thomas agrees, and then notices 2 pencil-drawn sketches on the wall, one of a chair and another of a brain. He asks Ruby about them, and she simply says they look pretty. Thomas compliments her, saying she looks better, and asks her to repeat what she wanted him to bring. She does, and he nods before leaving. The next day, Ruby is seen on a mattress with a pillow beside her. Thomas arrives and hands her a book. As she flips through it, she suddenly realizes she has read this book before. Overwhelmed, she clutches it tightly. It's the first memory she has from her life before captivity. Thomas tells her that certain triggers might help her regain lost memories. For the first time, Ruby feels a glimmer of hope. He offers to help her recover more memories, and she thanks him. Later, when Thomas brings her food, he asks if there's anything else she wants. She requests a red bush tea. Without hesitation, he fetches it for her. As soon as Ruby inhales its scent, a memory resurfaces. She smiles and, for the first time, questions Thomas directly. Did he know she would choose this specific tea? He smiles back and simply says, "It's the only thing you drink." Ruby asks him how he knows so much about her, and he replies that he did his research. Later, Ruby examines her book and stumbles upon a page filled with seemingly meaningless letters. When she places the mirror piece she hid earlier over the letters, they spell out, "Don't trust him." Seconds later, Thomas enters the room with a table. He has prepared dinner for them, and they eat together. During the meal, Thomas asks Ruby about the book. She praises it, especially its ending. Smiling, Thomas attempts to hold Ruby's hand, but she pulls away. When he asks what's wrong, she hesitates before questioning how many others he has held captive before her. Thomas denies the accusation, but Ruby is determined to uncover the truth. She accuses him of stalking, enslaving, assaulting, and murdering women like her. Before she can continue, Thomas slams his fist on the table, startling her. He wipes the blood from his arm and denies her claims again. Ruby then insists that if he has done this before, she doesn't want to believe their connection is special. Thomas swears she is the only one and leaves the room. The moment he exits, Ruby's fearful expression vanishes, revealing that she was only pretending. The next day, Thomas tells Ruby her legs are healing but need more time. Once he leaves, she unwraps her bandages and inspects her legs. There are no cuts. She manages to stand and walks to the door. When she touches the doorknob, she unlocks a memory of herself and a man standing in front of her home. She gives up on trying to escape and returns to bed. While reading the hidden message in her book, she accidentally smears the ink. When she smells it, another memory surfaces, her hiding something behind a brick in the room. She removes the brick and finds a dozen matches, realizing the secret messages were written with them. Later, during dinner, Ruby asks for a candle to set a romantic mood. When Thomas lights it with a match, he suggests they start over, and Ruby agrees. She tells him about a recurring dream where she sinks underwater until a hand reaches out to save her. As she describes it, her hand inches toward the match. Just as she is about to grab it, Thomas places his hand over hers. She fakes a cough, brings her hand to her chest, and successfully steals the match without him noticing. Ruby's days continue. She writes in her book, exercises her legs, and practices using the broken mirror piece as a weapon. While Thomas helps her walk, she pretends her legs are still weak. At one point, she writes "play along" in her book. The next morning, Ruby is doing push-ups but quickly jumps into bed and pretends to read when she hears Thomas approaching. He offers to help her exercise before dinner, and she agrees. As he supports her, she feigns weakness. When they reach the other side of the room, Thomas praises her progress and says that if she keeps improving, they might have dinner upstairs soon. That evening, Thomas declares their meal is special and urges Ruby to try it. When she does, another memory returns, she and Thomas dining at a restaurant on what appears to be a date. They seem comfortable together. Thomas then places a necklace around her neck and kisses her forehead. Back in the present, Ruby, shocked, asks if they were together before. Thomas nods, explaining that the meal she remembers was their anniversary dinner. She tearfully smiles at him. Later that night, while brushing her teeth, Ruby notices the initials RAW on the corner of a drawing Thomas put on the wall. The next morning, she spots a boat outside through her small window. Later, as she and Thomas discuss her book, he reminisces about their time together. The scene cuts to Ruby drawing while Thomas sleeps in her bed. Ensuring he's out cold, she quietly approaches the door. Before she can open it, Thomas, still half asleep, warns her that it's cold outside and she needs a coat. Instead of leaving, she picks up a ball from the floor, pretending that was her only intention. That night, Thomas covers Ruby with a blanket, triggering a memory of them being intimate. The next day, he dances with her, unlocking another memory, dancing at a party where Thomas proclaims his love. Ruby reciprocates and they kiss. Returning to the present, she tells Thomas she now believes they were together. Later, Thomas explains how the remote control in the room works and plays music. Ruby starts dancing for him. They laugh and kiss, but just as things become intimate, she begins to cry. She asks how they ended up like this, and Thomas agrees to tell her. A flashback shows Ruby waiting for Thomas at a bar with her roommate, Nick, who openly flirts with her. Thomas, missing his train, texts her that his friend Rob is picking him up and that he'll see her soon. Meanwhile, Nick tries to kiss Ruby. When she refuses, he persists, knocks her unconscious, and assaults her. Thomas arrives at Ruby's house and, seeing what happened, kills the still drunk Nick. He carries Ruby to Rob's car. Rob hesitantly agrees to drive them to Thomas's home, where Ruby regains consciousness. It is revealed that she lost her memory due to the attack. Rob insists on calling an ambulance, but Thomas stops him. After an argument, Rob reluctantly agrees to help Thomas with his plan to restore Ruby's memory. They travel far north, where Thomas eventually cuts ties with Rob and thanks him. He then takes Ruby to an abandoned island farm, where he keeps her captive. Over time, Thomas learns about retrograde amnesia, where victims forget everything before their trauma. He realizes that whenever Ruby sleeps too much, her memory resets to just after the attack. To help her regain her memories, he starts showing her pictures, but she remains unresponsive. Determined to speed up the process, Thomas studies how to trigger memories and control her sleep patterns. When he gives her favorite book, she finally shows progress. He then decides he needs a blank slate to fully regain her trust and memory. He constructs the White Room, fabricates the story about injuring her legs, and pretends to be her captor. After hearing the full truth, Ruby is in tears, seemingly regaining her memory. She and Thomas become intimate and fall asleep together. However, Ruby wakes up first. Silently, she turns off Thomas's alarm watch. She grabs the broken mirror piece and stabs him. She begins crawling toward the exit, but Thomas tries to stop her. She kicks him and escapes outside. Tearfully looking at the sky, she runs toward the boat but collapses before she can leave. She wakes up in a hospital room, where a doctor assures her she will be fine but may experience short-term memory loss due to her injury. The doctor is revealed to be Thomas, who has once again orchestrated a new scenario to regain her trust and restore her memories. So that's it. Hope you enjoy the story. Subscribe and press the bell icon for more videos.